Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, an inspired conversation space between Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner on the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness.
We keep our conversations honest, our experiences real, and our philosophies exploratory. We believe that in order to raise incredible humans, we first have to raise ourselves. We know that in order to rock the family, you've got to nourish the mother. If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively, head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper. And for all live-streamed pre-release podcasts and all our free content, head over to our free Facebook group, Nourishing the Mother with Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Just letting you know that this podcast became a long one, so we have separated it into two parts. This is part one. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast is a post-birth pelvic pain, shame, and dysfunction. You are not alone. And we want to say that to you again. You are not alone in this or in this journey. So that is the purpose of our podcast today, is to bring the community and the sense of shared experience to you, with you, for you. And we hope that you feel a sense of holding and deep, deep self-compassion and compassion for other women and the experience that we all share. So as we enter today, we're going to be talking about some topics that might be a little bit triggering. So just a little trigger warning for you that we will be talking about different types of birth, different types of intervention potentially, and different types of pain, shame, and dysfunction outcome. So if you're not in the space of feeling ready for that conversation, then just press pause and know that it's here for you to return to whenever you are ready.
Thanks, Jules. So this is a really important podcast for us to open up, because if you followed along, Julie has shared so beautifully and in such a raw and vulnerable way her experience of prolapse. And in doing that, you have had, you've almost opened the floodgates of women coming to you saying, me too.
Yeah.
Oh, this is what happened to me.
Yeah.
And, perhaps women who've never felt comfortable to even share it with anyone.
Yeah.
Who have like locked it away in Pandora's box, just not able to look at. And so in doing that, right? The shame corner,
in this enormous shame box that just lurks and seeps through every area of her life, my life. And
in an insidious way, right? Because whatever we have shame about tends to control us and run us. So I just want to first of all acknowledge you for like the courage it can take to share something that is really for you super wobbly. Like you're navigating this with us, and that takes enormous amount of courage. When you don't have the answers, right? Like you're finding your way in the dark, and I love that you're doing that with the community, because it gives other women an opportunity to say, oh, I can share my story and still be okay, or I can share my story and still be worthy.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I just feel that so deeply. It makes me well up with heart tears as I'm the fullness that it is to be vulnerable and to lead from that place, and then be met with a sea of women's compassion. It is just, you move from a place of feeling shattered and isolated and hollowed out to a place of empowerment, and I can do this. And that's the power of women supporting women and leading from a place of vulnerability, is it actually builds the most enormous intrinsic sense of strength, not one that's dependent on external factors.
It's like you're all these like little, like, I imagine like all these kind of like buoys in the sea, like bobbing up, like wondering if they're going to go under. And then they all come together and create like a life raft, you know, that says like, we can do this. This is hard, but we can, like, through strength and through each other, there's
I love it.
Possibility for healing.
It's a beautiful metaphor. Yeah. Because we do truly all feel at sea and alone and drowning at different points in time. So it's a perfect metaphor, right? So even in the sharing of this story, as you know, if you listened to our podcast on postpartum healing, I cried my way through the entire thing as it was my first entry point into opening that veil and saying, this is me. This is another one of my flaws, in inverted commas. Here's another one of our cultural, socialized, internalized belief systems and structures that I'm in opposition to. Because on some level, for all of us, but I'll speak specifically to mine, I have this internalized version of the idealized sexual woman. And she certainly doesn't have a floppy, prolapsed, wounded vagina, does she? She certainly has, you know, perky boobs and no stretch marks and a perfect tummy that fits perfectly in lingerie, and who is openly expressed, or who gets wet instantly, who has no shame, who's, I don't know, sexually adventurous and outward, who has this perfect, pristine pussy. So to voice and say straight up, here's all of the ways I don't fit that mold, is actually really scary, because there's part of you that's rubbing up against these, I'm not saying they're a truth, but our beliefs we experience as a truth. Right?
Yeah. And so our body tells us that's truth.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, for me, it really felt like this double-sided seesaw, which I think is perfect, right? Because on one side, I have all of this support and empowerment and openness, and the more that I can be transparent in all of the areas of my life, so there's no separation, of course, the more powerful and empowered I become. We self-sabotage our own empowerment when we tuck and hide and, you know, navigate in different ways who we are in different areas of our life. But when I'm just me everywhere, then there's nothing I'm hiding from, because you can see my, inverted commas, my worst aspects. And I'm like, yeah, I know, it's there.
Yeah.
So on one side of this seesaw, I have increased power, support, vulnerability, excitement in a way, as I'm meeting all of these women and hearing their stories, like, you know, lovely, lovely stuff. And on the other side, I have myself facing all of the ways that I don't fit the mold that says I'm not sexy, I'm not desirable, I'm broken, I'm dysfunctional, I have pain, suffering, shame, you know. So it's this balanced seesaw of these two, in a way, oppositional effects. And I think that is always the common experience whenever we're breaking down a belief, right? Is there's an enormous amount of challenge in doing that, and an equilibrating enormous amount of support, right? So I see both.
And I would also say, when you're explaining it like that, that there's something in, and my thought process is completely gone since I just coughed, but you were talking and I was thinking there's something in the way that this takes you to that edge, and also it's like the veil of illusion about perfection drops away, because as all of these women come to you and say, me too, you're kind of going, well, who the fuck is actually this perfect thing? And then you go, oh, It's a social construct. It's a social construct to sell shit and make us feel really bad about ourselves.
I just love that you highlighted that. Yes, exactly. Right.
Because, you know, with every message that you get that says, like, yeah, that's my experience, then you then go, well, like, what is this performative nonsense over here that continues to reinforce women's disconnection with themselves? And, you know, we see it in Hollywood, right? And the expose of, like, celebrities' real skin textures, for example. And then we go, oh, I have skin like that. Oh, but they don't want to show me because there's a mystery and an allure and a seduction in me thinking that they've got something I don't have, like the perfect skin, for example.
Yeah.
And so whenever we get to break that down, we then get to kind of like come home to more pieces of ourselves that we've cast out and said, no, you don't belong here.
Oh, yes.
Because we go, oh, no, you're just a part of experience of being human. Which I just love. I just love it.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I even had a few women message me who were like, oh my God, I had no idea you look like this, you know, sexually liberated, enjoying amazing, incredible sex woman. I had no idea that you were just like me.
And what does that mean for that woman then?
Right.
And she then goes, oh, I can have that too.
Right. That's like my heart just like bursts.
I love that.
Because we can't be, we don't know how other people perceive us, right?
Yeah.
All we can ever do is just be you, be you, be you, and create less and less separation, right? I mean, that's all we can ever do. So when I heard that, I was like, oh, yes. Good Lord. And I hope you take that somewhere magnificent for yourself.
Yeah. And that is where it's worth all of the, you know, vulnerability hangovers and all of the edginess about showing up with your story, because if it breaks the illusion and the shame story for one woman, then it's worth it.
100%. Even just receiving that post was worth it. It's totally worth it. So the other thing that we wanted to do, which, you know, we're always a little bit contentious on this podcast, aren't we? As we break down beliefs and we ask you to think outside of the ways that you inherently, naturally or comfortably think. That's kind of the underlying philosophy on everything that we do, right?
Yeah.
Where is there polarization? Meaning, where have you separated life into right and wrong categories and therefore filter everything around that and essentially create a smaller life? And being able to see that everything is equal and everything is love. I mean, this is ultimately a spiritual concept, and that our responsibility is to say yes to life. That's the tantric concept. Not, I'll say yes to you, but not you. You're a no, 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 no. All right, you, yes. Because there's so much suffering involved in the no.
Yeah. Which is essentially our attachment to how we think things need to be.
Right. So in the scheme of all of this, I have been very clear in when I have asked for help, and I have gone everywhere. Bridget's probably seen me in all of the groups that we're in together. Yeah. I have like posted everywhere trying to find women like me who are looking at a surgical pathway. And unfortunately, what I have found is fucking no one.
Yeah.
Because what I've realized is we live in this middle age, let's say just post children to menopause, so our fertile range, let's say, where all of this shit is happening to women. And yet there's no structures, there's no conversation, there's no public health awareness. So they're left floundering on their own or completely shutting it off into shame baskets that they do nothing with until at menopause, now the medical system starts having conversations around prolapse. So, right. So post-menopausal prolapse, there's heaps of women that have all of the medical interventions. But unfortunately, even with them, I can't find women in essentially what we're talking about is our parents' generation who are sexually active, sexually liberated, willing to have those conversations, are even nuanced in the sensitivity of sexuality, which is what I'm trying to find out about, right? Like it doesn't even exist. So trying to have those conversations is really hard. And also breaks my heart, because even when I had a follow-up consultation with one of the surgeons on the team, and she was saying to me, look, Julie, I mean, okay, you've got a category 2, but your prolapse isn't that bad. Because you know what she's comparing me as the middle-aged woman to is the postmenopausal woman who's never had anything done and who literally has all of her inside bits hanging outside that every morning when she gets up, she has to shove back inside of herself.
Wow.
Like, that's what they see in the medical system.
God. That's just, I mean, like, that's...
And Bridget, it's classed as elective surgery. Okay, let me tell you this. These are the conversations I have with these surgeons. They're actually really great. So she was saying, listen,
how the way they repress and deny women. Jesus Christ.
I know. She's saying, you know, Julie, even in because of COVID and obviously all of elective surgeries have altered and the schedules and however it works in hospitals. So these women who have all of their insides hanging on the outside every single day are classified as elective surgeries, so just continuously get bumped to the bottom of the list.
Oh, my God.
So this one surgeon has a wait list in our public health system of 700 women.
No way.
That experience. But
it's this one surgeon.
One surgeon.
I mean, how many surgeons are there?
Right. This is my
across
point.
Each city.
This is my point. And then she said, and you know what else? You know what else, Julie? Is if I have a woman who has a twisted fallopian tube or ovary or something along those lines that's in enormous pain and all of the things, she said, if there's a man who has a twisted testicle, so essentially very, very similar experience, he'll get bumped to the top of the list and she'll get bumped to the bottom.
No.
That's more serious, in inverted commas.
Oh, my God.
Right?
There's who?
The medical system.
Oh, my God. The patriarchy.
I know, we're laughing because
oh,
it's
my
so
God.
fucking ridiculous that it makes you so angry. Sometimes the only solution you can do is laugh at the ludicrousy when you see it so blatantly.
Yeah, I probably should have given an extra like language warning on this podcast because there's going to be so much swearing.
Well, I mean, and I hope that on some level it stirs something in all of us.
Yeah.
Because this is what we don't hear and see.
This is a consequence of a bunch of middle-aged white men sitting in ivory towers making all the decisions. Like, this is in one area of life, right, we're talking about.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Just, oh, my God.
Yeah. Yeah. This whole process is like peeling back all of these curtains for me. I just am finding it such an extraordinary set of conversations to be having that it appears to me no one else is having. And I'll tell you why no one else is having them, because we have, like we do in parenting, the left-wing people who are all about surgery is the devil. You don't need to go there because it's all about the imbalances in the body's pressure, the body's muscles, ligaments, posture, energetics, attachments, emotional, all of that is on one side, right? And the other side is we just don't do anything, of course, medical, or we wait till it's so bad and then we cut everything out. And so I find myself once again playing in the middle of these two places and consciously asking myself not to, or find a way to equilibrate both sides. Because the truth is, I can't be free to make a decision until I'm free from polarization.
Yeah.
Because it's not really a decision if I'm making it from an emotionally based, reactive, blind belief place. Right? So are there inherently risks to this type of prolapse of any and every sort of tearing of fascia and ligaments in a woman's pelvis from natural birth possible? Yeah, they are. Even if, yes, the medical system, which we talked about in that prolapse podcast, yes, the way that it creates enormous interventions that have hideous consequences and side effects for women that largely, as I see it, most women walk into not even knowing. Or, as we'll talk about in some stories, like the husband stitch, not even being told what is happening to them as it's happening to them.
God.
Like our birth system, yes, has a heck ton to answer for when it comes to women's pain, shame, dysfunction, and injury of her pelvis. But also we would be remiss not to also consider that, as I can understand it from the few specialists that I've spoken to, anywhere between 60% and 100% of women who birth vaginally have some sort of prolapse or tearing involved, tearing of the fascia involved. So on some level, having a vaginal birth does lead the way to some sort of this experience happening. Versus saying natural birth is, you know, when it's done without intervention and it's physiologically normal, you would avoid any of this. I don't think that's true.
And I mean, also that's going to be very, very hard to quantify, because in Australia, at least, there's less than 5% of births are physiologically normal births without intervention. So to get the data, we would need to see the data on that subset of women, and also how many of that subset of women have had previous births that were a result of intervention. So, for example, like my third birth was in that 5%, but my previous two births were not. And so, unless you have a woman, so does that set me up differently, right?
Totally, yeah.
And so it's a very hard thing to quantify, but certainly I think, yes, the intervention has a lot to do with it, but ultimately that's the system we have. 95% of women will have a level of intervention in their birth. So I like that you're pointing this out, because my bent is like, well, let's have more physiological birth. But the reality is that's hard to access.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to access, and also you could do it and still end up
there. That's right.
I mean, I would argue not to such a degree of detriment, but there's no guarantee in that either, is the way that I'm saying, can we just depolarize the way that we're looking at it? So there's that. And then there's also, I've been very clear in all of the groups, and I've put posts everywhere that I can. I have looked at, like, I've put this out on a podcast that has nearly 1 million downloads now. I've put it all over our socials. I've posted it in all of these sex groups, women's groups, like all of the network that I have. And I'm hearing women who see, read, hear my experience are contacting their networks to see if people have the answers to my questions. So the network of women having this conversation based on my sharing has gone out. I have
nothing coming back.
Woman back. This podcast is sponsored by what is coming up in our places and spaces. Bridgie.
Yes, so Reimagining Motherhood, which is the community and membership for women who are deeply desiring to empower their motherhood and feel more inspired and connected. So coming up, we have a course on Recalibrate. So it's all about mother rage, repair, and resourcing yourself in motherhood. And it's in response to the conversations happening and also what's alive in me right now. And whenever we show up with what's alive in us, there's something potent there. So I'm looking forward to the toolkits that I'll be sharing, and also just the conversations that we're going to be having around, you know, again, bringing more things out of the shadows for mothers and accepting more parts of ourselves. And what about you, Jules?
Lover School begins on April 25th. Creating desire, cultivating passion, up-leveling intimate communication in long-term relationship, which is a totally different beast.
Yes.
To any other type of relationship.
Oh, I love it.
So I bring all of my wisdom, experience. There's trainings for more masc beings. There's trainings for more femme beings that you can watch at your own self-pace. And we gather together in a group for 6 weeks where I'm available for your facilitation, for your steps forward, for opening community conversation around things that we would normally not open. And we all know the value of vulnerability and openness from this podcast. So you can find out more at julietenner.love. And I have been very clear in each one of these to say I'm not interested in hearing about all of the things that I need to do in an alternative fashion, because I have fucking done them.
Yeah. I've seen you do them over the years. You've done so many things.
I've done so many things. And at some point also, part of me also rubs up against the belief system that always seems to return to you're not doing enough. You know, something wrong with your kids. Oh, the mum's not doing enough.
Yeah.
Something wrong with your body. Oh, you're not doing enough. something wrong with
and it's very individualist, right? It doesn't take into context the broader like system that you live in, the broader, you know, social mores, beliefs, you know, like socio-economic situation that you personally live in that's perhaps perpetuated by the system. It doesn't put anything back on that. It's just you.
Yeah. And I just think, fuck, I am doing so much. I'm doing so much. I'm still doing weekly Pilates. I'm still doing proper breath work. I'm still focused on posture. I enter fucking emotional vortexes almost constantly. You know, so I just think at some point also we have to move away from surgery is the devil, because also we have this beautiful healthcare system that when we need it can be the most wonderfully supportive experience
and liberating
in our lives.
And liberating, right? Because what does it get you to liberate you from? Well, it liberates you from that constant, you know, looking outside yourself, looking under all this rock that might be, you know, hiding all of the answers, right? Like, which you can do on a constant treadmill, right?
Yeah. And are there any guarantees for surgery? Of course not. Like, of course not. When we consent to surgery, it's not like, oh, it's the answer and I no longer have to worry about it. Like, of course not. And I don't think that it's sold that way. And I think when you're in that system too, if you are getting the right care and you are actively involved in your own healthcare, just like in birth, and actively seeking the right professionals with the right statistics, with the right outcomes, with the matched mindset who answer all of your questions, like it's still advocacy within a healthcare system, right? I'm not saying just go slapdash your surgery anywhere. I'm saying be conscious. Yes, do everything you can to see if there's a way, because for some women that has worked.
Yeah.
And there's no one way, because it seems to me women have experienced reversal in their prolapse through a myriad of different experiences. So go find it. Yes, if it's empowering, if it feels like a path for you, if it feels in alignment, if it feels like it's leading you somewhere, if it feels like it's bringing back your power, go do all of those things. I always said to myself, I had to do all of those things for me before I got to surgery, because I don't want to be left with that feeling of like I copped out in some way. I want to know that if I'm choosing surgical intervention, that I've really exhausted all of my options. I've done everything that I can or want to do. And that then it's a choice, which is where I found myself. Oh, I can't think what the point was. Consent. So I researched, I looked at, my surgeon was horrified. I found YouTube clips that literally are the surgery being done. I watched it. I watched surgeries on, God bless the internet. I watched surgeons who were doing educational, I'm sure for universities or something, tutorials on the removal of mesh and the complications. And like I actually visually looked at it all.
Yeah.
I looked at all of the outcomes, all of the side effects. So when I went back to her, I went, blah, 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 blah. Here's all of the statistics, here's everything. She was like, what are you doing? Why are you looking at that? And I'm like, well, because this is consent. I can't just consent to this surgery without also consenting to the possible outcome of all of these things. Because when I say yes to that I hope gives me what I want, I'm also saying yes to the potentiality of everything that doesn't give me what I want. So I need to enter this with eyes wide open. If this happens, what will I do? If that happens, what are my options? Because the worst thing I could possibly do is go in blind, end up there, and then be scrambling to find an answer.
Yeah, or extremely traumatized as well because you hadn't looked at any of that.
Yeah. So I looked at all of it and I literally I spent like an hour and a half with her, just hammering her with all of these questions. I had printed off questions from the internet that people had recommended, like all of it. And she was like, wow, I've never had anyone ask any of these questions. Usually it's me having to tell them that there's side effects, which even that horrifies me. But I think that speaks to the generation that she's mostly dealing with, which is going to be postmenopausal women who are our parents' age, who still come from the white coat has all the answers.
Yeah. Exactly.
So the other thing that I just want to put in here that I'm really, really find myself sinking my teeth into right now is ultimately the returning of a spiritual concept, which is nothing is missing. Nothing is missing. Nothing is missing. Shall I say that again, Bridget?
Yes. I'd love you to apply that in the context of this, right? Because at the moment, the I guess visceral resistance typically women have to the kinds of surgeries you're looking at is loss, for example, of the uterus, or the loss of the cervix, or the loss of something.
Yes.
And so what you're suggesting is, well, you can't gain or lose anything because everything's in conservation, nothing's missing.
Yes. Correct.
So how are you playing with that in the context of contemplating?
I'm playing with that because let me tell you, as I said, no one had got back to me. No one has had the exact experience that I've had or gone through both of the surgeries that I'm looking at together. So I was looking at what is the experience of women who lose their womb and uterus. Lose their uterus and cervix, and what is the experience of women who have had their front or back vagina cut? What is their experience? So I was interested in what is there a woman who has both, who also has tantric experiences or orgasms. So I haven't found anyone that fits that bill. But I have found two women who I have most gracefully had, online just messaging communications with me, who have shared their experiences. So that's been incredibly cathartic and healing for me, because one woman who lost her cervix says she didn't have cervical orgasms through penetration sex, but she could self-cervix her orgasms. So she could use a wand or a serpent or something like that and create cervical orgasms, which she says she can still access a version of, even though her cervix is missing. So she said it's not the same, it's not as sharp, or, that like heightened experience, but she said it's like a flavor of it. And I think if I practiced enough, I could get there. She said, I'm not practicing. So, but I perceive I could. Then there was another woman who had her front and back vaginal wall cut. And she said she experienced no reduction in sensitivity, which is fascinating.
That's awesome.
Yeah. One of the considerations is reprolapse. So I'm looking at that at the moment too. But in terms of this, nothing is missing. I also have been speaking to women who have chosen ablation. So women who have lost their uterus, and also women who have chosen ablation. So to have the lining of the uterus burned away. Have you heard of that?
I've never heard of ablation.
Okay. So it's an option. It's usually an option that non-binary people choose, or women who do not want to have a period, do not want to have children, but identify as female. So I have been speaking to some of these women and women, actually, because I was choosing femme-identifying humans, and feminist, and trying to place what is this piece of me that feels like if I remove my uterus, that's somehow anti-feminist or anti-woman. So I'm looking at finding the women who fit essentially feminist, identify as female, love being woman, don't want or have or experience a period, and actively have chosen not to. And listening to them has been fantastic. It has been fantastic because they're like, I chose this as a feminist choice, to be able to choose my biology and its function of my body is empowering for me as a woman. That I have choice over my reproductive function is a feminist choice.
Yeah.
So I loved listening to their experience. It's incredibly empowering for them, that they have always never regretted that. They've loved the experience of not having a period anymore, which I don't see as any different to those of us who use a Mirena or something like that, or choose to be on the pill and not have a period.
Yeah.
It's not any different. And when I say nothing is missing, even when we remove something from the body, like the uterus or the cervix, what is it that it means? What is its essence? What is its experience or attachment? Like, what is it that it means to me? Where else does that exist in my body that would heighten as a result of it no longer having, like, let's say 40%, or let's say 80% of the function of my femininity, let's say, existed in my womb. That was my attachment to it. And I remove my womb. Well, that 80% of femininity, I don't lose. It just changes form. And where does it spring up and bloom? In my body.
Yeah.
Maybe my vagina, maybe my cervix, maybe my heart.
Maybe your breasts.
maybe my, who knows, maybe my thoughts, maybe my internal dialogue. Nothing is missing. It just changes form.
Yeah, I love that.
So I've just like been sinking deeper and deeper and deeper, and like, nothing is missing. And you and I both know, having done the de-martini, we show up to do the de-martini every week.
Yeah.
That this is essentially one of those questions that we inevitably end up at is, okay, this thing that I think is missing from me, my life, my experience, whatever, what is the form that it exists in? And when you get there, it fucking bends you to your knees with gratitude.
Yeah.
Because the form that it is in is more aligned to your life, your purpose, and your mission right now. So one of the ones that I did when we did our de-martini, because we were in a de-martini masterclass to get, mastermind together.
Yeah.
And I did one a couple of weeks ago on my like hard body. Like, I miss my firm body, my pre-baby firm, fit, musced body that I was like, that feels really missing.
Kind of. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the process is, well, what does that mean to me? Well, it means, strength and solidness. And I can't remember exactly what I put, but it was something along those lines. So where is that now? And you ask yourself consciously, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? And I just like blew my heart open as I realized me back then, who was so solid in her body, felt so or firm in the strength within of her body, felt so wobbly and flabby and flaccid and unknown and without strength in her life.
Yeah.
And so where had that firmness gone? I know who I am. I know where I belong. I know what I'm here to do. I know what I wake up for every day.
Yeah.
She didn't have that. She longed for that, wished for it every day. It was such pain to live like that.
And so, to your point about the new form being more aligned, more on purpose. Yeah. So if you cast, if you cast this, to the gods, right? Like, if you take the step of this surgery and you say, yeah, I'm choosing to have my uterus removed, with the trust that the new form of whatever you perceive the uterus gives you is going to be more aligned, more connected, more on path for you, then does it take away for you a lot of the fear or the grief?
Well, this is what I'm not making any decisions yet. Just so everyone's clear, there's no line in the sand for me. I'm not like rushing into this. This is just like, I will know when I arrive there. And at the moment, I'm still looking and looking and sinking and seeking and revealing to myself my own biases. And then when I see the bias, trying to bust the bias so that ultimately, I hope I end up at a place of freedom. And from that place, I can make an empowered decision, but not when I'm running biases.
Yeah.
So I'm still in my anti-bias work right now. There's no decisions. But I tell you, I am loving listening to the stories of women, and I am loving having conversations that I've never had in my life and seeing systems of oppression and marginalization that I've never seen before. And even though it's painful, I like seeing my own inner bias and my own inner polarized belief systems, because I haven't seen those before.
Yeah.
right? Like we can be born anew to ourselves every single day if we choose to.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes it's excruciating to go, oh God, yeah, right. I didn't see that. But it's so expansive at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's both, right? That's the addiction to bloody personal growth.
And that wraps up part 1 of our podcast, which we hope has opened up some new awareness in you, perhaps reflecting on your own story. And we do hope you take yourself gently into your world after sitting with this. And next week, we're going to be sharing with you the really deeply raw and vulnerable stories of women who shared with Julie their own experiences.
So please move gently with yourself. Please find the healing and the communities that support your empowerment and the best choices for you and your health, knowing they're probably not going to be the same as the woman next to you, and allowing an enormous amount of breathing room and spaciousness around how we can be the same and also quite different. You can find out more about how to join our spaces and dive into your work. Our work, your work. We work together. It's true. BridgetWood.life and julietenner.love. And Bridgie, what have you got going on?
All Things Reimagining Motherhood, which is a community and membership for women who are deeply desiring to empower their motherhood and feel more inspired and connected. So coming up, we have a course on Recalibrate. So it's all about mother rage, repair, and resourcing yourself in motherhood. And it's in response to the conversations happening and also what's alive in me right now. And whenever we show up with what's alive in us, there's something potent there. So I'm looking forward to the toolkits that I'll be sharing, and also just the conversations that we're going to be having around, again, bringing more things out of the shadows for mothers and accepting more parts of ourselves. And what about you, Jules?
Lover School begins on April 25th. Creating desire, cultivating passion, up-leveling intimate communication in long-term relationship, which is a totally different beast.
Yes.
To any other type of relationship.
Oh, I love it.
So I bring all of my wisdom, experience. There's trainings for more masc beings. There's trainings for more femme beings that you can watch at your own self-pace. And we gather together in a group for 6 weeks where I'm available for your facilitation, for your steps forward, for opening community conversation around things that we would normally not open. And we all know the value of vulnerability and openness from this podcast. So you can find out more at julietenner.love.
Remember to nourish someone, to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
Thank you so much for listening. We literally couldn't do this without you. Please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively into your life, then head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper.
And if you feel like giving back a little to this free content, please rate us on iTunes or Facebook, all of which helps the podcast reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always